Go ahead. Yeah. All right. Got another
Absolute
one.
Green Lantern
Got
is
another
so amazing.
one.
I love this issue because it
Another
basically
one.
gives
And
us
keep it
so
going.
much context to what's going on. So, for those of you guys who haven't really been keeping up, not a whole lot's happened so far. It'll be huge now, but up until this point in time, all we really had was Abin Sur, basically the guy who traditionally turned Hal Jordan into the Green Lantern after bypassing Guy Gardner. But within the Absolute Universe, it's a whole different ballgame because Abin Sur showed up here and then basically constructed this giant green dome around the town. And you had guys like John Stewart, and you have Kyle Rayner, and you have Guy Gardner, and you have Hal Jordan, among a handful of other people. But seemingly, when this dome happened and then Abin Sur showed up, a variety of people started attacking him. And essentially, they were all killed, right? So you only have a handful of people left in the town. One of the things that John Stewart had figured out is that seemingly gold, or the color yellow, is not impacted by the power of the Green Lantern. And so that's why the question is asked by Todd. He says, "What are you mooning over there?" And John just holds up and says, "A gold ring." And he says, or rather, electroplated tin, likely no real gold in it. "I think it used to be an earring, or at least part of one. I found it in the road yesterday." And of course, Todd asks, like, why would you be carrying around somebody's earring? And he says, because of whose ear it was in. And of course, this catches Todd by surprise, but John says, "Our friend hit the green wall so hard, his head was pulped. His skin, blood, bone, nothing penetrated the shield. Nothing except for this." And he says, "Cheap fancy dress, costume, jewelry by any measure. Why did it make it through? What are the rules? What don't we know?" And it frustrates the hell out of John because he grabs the earring and he throws it through the green dome. And that's where Todd's like, okay, how, right? Why is it that gold or yellow or what have you can pass through this dome, but nothing else can? Nothing gets through. No animals, no objects other than this gold earring. And the response of John, "I don't know, but I'm going to know everything. And I think before anything else, I should talk to Hal Jordan." Now, one of the things to keep in mind here is that when all this initially popped off, Hal Jordan was not presented as the brave individual that we're used to from the main DC universe. I wouldn't go so far as to say he was a coward, but I will say, like so many people, he panicked. So much so that he tried to shoot Abin Sur. Now, he was warned by John Stewart, that's a bad idea. For all you know, he could take your hand. And then what ended up happening is that after all that had popped off, Hal Jordan had just shown up with a black hand. And so what you have are kind of two stories happening at the same time, which is to say, you have what's happening right now with Sojourner talking to Hal Jordan, who has a black hand. Everything else is effectively a flashback, right? And so that's what makes this so dope, is because in essence, Hal Jordan seems to be corrupted. We don't necessarily know a whole lot about it, but we will. We do know enough to know, though, that by wielding this black hand, he launches an attack against Sojourner, kind of against his will, and it seems to overwhelm her power of the Green Lantern, but not immediately, because what she starts to do is conjure the power through her ring. Now keep in mind, we don't know how she became a Green Lantern. We do not have an answer to that question. We will in this video, but we do not have one yet. And so because of that, she is able to basically conjure a hard-like construct by pushing the darkness away. She literally makes a giant fist, which is clearly a throwback to the old school pre-crisis Hal Jordan stories in DC Comics. But that's where Sojourner tells him, right? Like, get it under control. Get all of your crap under control, or I swear to God, I will do it for you. And Hal just asks, how are you doing this? How are you controlling this green light? And so again, jumping to this flashback, John has this conversation with Joe, where he basically starts asking her about the wedding ring. And he's like, "I'm just wondering what it's made of, Joe. It's fine if you don't know." And of course, her response, "I was the one who picked out the damn rings, John. It's solid gold. She wanted something cheaper. It was our first fight." So again, you kind of have a back and forth with these two. They clearly have history together, but John's like, "Look, I'm not really here to pick a fight, right? It's just, there's something that I want your eyes on. There's something that I want you to see." And so what ends up happening is that, again, with Hal Jordan here, that Hal Jordan brings this kind of gold blue devil, basically, right? He's like, "Behold the Blue Devil." Only he's not blue, because this is an all gold, basically Funko figure made to commemorate the 10th anniversary of a pretty forgettable Wayne Tarrant movie. 0 points of articulation, naturally. And he's like, "I paid $8 for it." And so at that point, John's like, "All right, let's put this to the test." because Hal Jordan gives it to John and he shows them, right? He's like, I was hoping for a plastic sword or something like that, but this will definitely do. And he grabs it and sticks it through the barrier. And that's when the two of them realize, okay, gold or yellow can penetrate this thing. And even John notices something, right? Because the object is bigger, the effect on the barrier is stronger. And he says that, right? Interesting. Definitely a stronger reaction than last time. So what do we think? And it's just kind of like, are you serious? Right? Like, are you serious about this? They're really kind of caught in shock. They're just sort of flabbergasted by the fact that this is possible. And so Jo asked the question. She's like, this thing, this alien force field that totaled a speeding motorcycle right in front of us, you're telling us that it doesn't work on plastic. Now, this is a very important statement from Jon Stewart. He says, we need to stop applying the rules that we know to the unknown. Now, this is kind of a meta commentary to a degree, because as you guys are figuring out here over the course of this, a lot of the traditional rules when it comes to the Green Lantern mythos aren't necessarily in effect here. Some of that's because we're only 4 issues into Absolute Green Lantern, so not enough of the story has been told in order for us to fully understand the context of what's happening here. But the other reason why Al Ewing is essentially saying this is because we're in the Absolute Universe. This is a whole different ballgame, right? The rules that we're traditionally used to in the main DC universe may or may not apply here. And so John asked the question, have you ever heard of the Philosopher's Stone? Now, initially they haven't, right? And he says it's the central symbol of alchemy, the substance that turns base metal into gold. It can also heal wounds, prolong life, create a homunculus, restore Voldemort, light an ever-burning lamp. It's a symbol. It stands for enlightenment. What is base becomes gold through knowledge. So yes, Jo, cheap plastic can breach the barrier if it takes the form of gold. And I think that's a clue. And so she asked the question, what about actual gold? And here's a crazy thing about this. And he's just like, way ahead of you. And of course, Jon Stewart takes his grandmother's ring and he just throws it at the wall. And it's the question, let's just see what happens. And when actual gold hits the wall, it creates a substantial hole. So gold itself has a massive impact on the green wall. And seemingly the power of the Green Lantern, it has the ability to disrupt Green Lantern constructs. And so at that point, it's like, okay, cool. So let's see if everybody has gold. Let's get as much gold as we possibly can around the town. Real gold, right? Not fake plastic stuff, but real gold, which clearly means that some marriages are going to end, which is going to be a very interesting scenario for us to see. The problem is we don't get to see it because Abin Sur shows up here and he just says, Jon Stewart, judgment is in progress. And Jon Stewart is destroyed, incinerated on the spot. And he just says, Jon Stewart has been judged. And of course, this leads to Jo and Hal Jordan freaking out and attacking Abin Sur. Todd comes out with a shotgun. Todd fires off a shot. Of course, Abin Sur conjures a construct that block the bullets. And he just says, judgment is in progress, Todd writes, be without fear. And Abin Sur takes off. But the death of Jon Stewart leaves Jo and Hal Jordan and Todd completely and totally emotionally devastated. Because at that point, it's just kind of like, okay, so we're basically in hell. We're locked inside this town. We cannot get out. The one person who had a clue to help us get out of this, he's gone now. So why in the world is this Abin Sur even doing all of this to us in the first place? Now, here's a cool thing. We finally start getting answers. Because what you do is you pick up again here in the present day with Hal and Jo. And the Black Hand basically speaks to Hal. It says, Hal Jordan, judgment was made, but penance can be offered. Now, of course, you get this kind of red response, right? Penance, you were right. You are right. You are always right. The truth is there for all to see. God is not a ring of light. God is a big black zero, the dark circle around everything. And inside the circle is a single black star, the black star, Hal. And so what we do is we pick up with this moment in the here and now with Sojourner and Hal Jordan in the present day. And basically Hal's response to her telling him he needs to get it together is no, right? I don't want to. Now, of course, Jo kind of responds with a bit of an apology and saying that she didn't necessarily mean it, but she says, you need to snap out of this. Stop letting this thing control you, this Black Hand or whatever it is. I do not want to hurt you. And the response of Hal, I wish you could, but it will not let you. So just go. Get out while you can. So what this shows here is that the Black
Is he
Hand is
basically immortal?
intermittently possessing Hal Jordan. Now, it also demonstrates a measure of sentience in the sense that the Black Hand speaks to Hal Jordan. Now, that is kind of a rule that is still maintained from the Jeff Johns days, when you actually had Black Hand, who was kind of the harbinger of the rise of the Black Lantern Corps. Basically a servant of Necron, the leader of the Black Lanterns. So you do kind of get these little moments here and there where the traditional mythos ties in. But then Hal Jordan is overtaken by the Black Hand when Joe says, look at what you did. So as you guys can probably tell, the Black Hand responds to anger. It responds to rage. Here's the other thing too. Look at Hal Jordan. Look at the way he looks. I'm really hoping here that what's happening is he's channeling the black and the red aspects of the emotional spectrum, right? Death and rage. Clearly he's pissed off, so the rage aspect makes sense, but we don't know how much of this is due to simply just the darkness and how much it's due to any other thing. It's also entirely possible here that instead of having an actual emotional spectrum,
that form that he takes is actually fire as fuck, chat. Holy fuck.
The way that we're used to, love and compassion and hate and all that kind of stuff, that instead you simply just have positive versus negative. That kind of seems to be what this is. But again, I could be wrong. And so the question that Hal asks is, what happened to Evergreen, Joe? And that's when you jump back to the city. And you get this kind of conversation between Todd and Hal and Joe, where Hal is talking about actually shooting Abin Sur. Because one of the things that he had realized in the conversations with John, right, the idea that gold passes through the barrier, that sure, Abin Sur creates these green barriers in order to prevent himself from getting shot. So what would happen if Hal Jordan made gold-plated bullets? They would pass through the barrier and they could take out Abin Sur. And so at that point, Joe asked the question, right, why are we the last ones? Out of a whole town, how many of nearly 3,000 people, why are the three of us the last ones? And she's like, I'll just go ask. So she walks outside of the building and starts calling the name of Abin Sur. And this is when the answers come into play, because Abin Sur appears to her and he says, Sojourner Merlane, be without fear. And she just asks, why? Right? Why did you kill all of them? And the response of Abin Sur, them all, I do not have understanding. And he says existence ended for Jason Simmons as an accident of the barrier and his relative speed when he crashed into it on his motorcycle. Existence ended for Rita Poswell as a considered judgment, as her chaotic action ended existence for Beatrice Coles. Continued chaotic action was unacceptable. So I destroyed her because she killed somebody else in trying to kill me. But Sojourner doesn't really understand. She's like, no, I saw it happen, right? You can't just pretend that you didn't kill these people. You murdered John in front of us. You killed Guy, this whole town. You disintegrated all of them. And now you're pretending that you didn't. And the response of Abin Sur, Sojourner Mulane, no other existence has ended as an action of this Abin Sur. And that's where she puts it together. And she's like, wait, they're alive. Is that what you're saying? And he says disintegrated, taken apart, broken into constituent molecules, strong implication of end state. Have understanding. That did not occur. Guy Gardner, John Stewart, Abigail Cable, and 2,809 other existences have not ended. They exist in Oa. They are within the Omega Alpha. They are in the second stage, and judgment remains in progress. Now, here's the crazy thing, because once you start to decipher what Abin Sur is actually saying, when Abin Sur appears to someone and says, be without fear, he's not judging them and saying, are you without fear? He's saying, do not be afraid. It's cool. It's just this amazing recollection. It hit me like a ton of bricks when I figured it out. I was like, wow. Because they're all being converted into Green Lanterns. Because Sojourner asked the question, tell me what that means. What judgment? The second stage of what? If you've taken them somewhere, can you bring them back? And the response of Abin Sur, continued existence must be within light. Judgment must be made. I am the Abin Sur. Ain must be selected. Ain Rao, Ain Sur, Ain R. Initiates must be selected. Initiates against the darkness. Be without fear, Sojourner Merlane. Fear cord. Fear the weaponers of Cord. And so it just kind of leaves her flabbergasted because he says, now you have understanding. Judgment is in progress. That's the crazy thing, because Abin Sur coming here, it's the traditional Green Lantern mythos reworked in a new way. Instead of Abin Sur arriving on Earth like he did in the main DC universe, as a Green Lantern who was basically dying, sending his ring out for a new host, which initially was going to choose Guy Gardner and instead chose Hal Jordan, in the Absolute Universe, he shows up on this world, locks down the entire city, and says, let's begin the process of figuring out which one of you are qualified to be a Green Lantern. Now, the way in which he does it is sketchy at best, right? Somebody barges into your home, locks the door, makes it impossible for you to escape, and then starts saying things like judgment in progress. Yeah, you're going to think they have it out for you. You're going to think they mean to kill you. But again, in a lot of ways, she's left with as many questions as she has answers, because you jump back to this present moment. And Hal asks the question, what happened then, Joe? What did you do? And Joe just says, once Abin Sur started to take off, you saw what happened. He was doing that thing that he always did. He went unsolid. He was going to become a ball of light and fly up to the sky and not answer anything. So I reached out instinctively, not thinking. I did not have understanding. And she says, I didn't grab him. I reached into him, into his unsolid form. My hand went into the green flame, and my wedding ring was solid gold, like the ring John threw, the one that tore a hole in Abin Sur's barrier. And now it was inside him. I was inside the light, and the light was inside of me. She basically took the power of the Green Lantern from him. She literally absorbed that power into herself and became the new Green Lantern that way. And that's why Abin Sur says chaotic action, right? This is an unpredictable act. You are not thinking when you're making this act. Anomaly. And then she just says, you know what happened after that. The barrier came down, the flame went out, and the giant Green Lantern symbol that was floating in the air smashed into the city and detonated like a nuclear bomb. And so at that point, you switch over to the aftermath of it all. And you have this guy where he asks the question, is everyone already here? And they're like, yep, right, ground team found one survivor, sir. We suspect there are others. The Nevada police say one of their controlmen is missing. And at that point, the guy's like, look, don't bore me with the details, right? I love that we've got a human resource to work with. Ground team, I'll get a double H steak box in the mail. But when I ask a question, I need you to hear the question in the question. Do you understand what I'm asking? And so he's not asking, did you find anything in terms of, are there any survivors or anything like that? Did you find anything of use? And so he asked the question, let me make it a little clear. Just how badly did Morgan screw us with that emergency broadcast? Am I about to see any sticky fingerprints from Lazarus? So again, we're getting elements from other Absolute titles. Lazarus, of course, being the organization that employs the Peacemakers in the Absolute Superman comic. And she just says they may have the knowledge, but with their ongoing situation, basically Superman, they could not get ahead of us on a response. And that's where he's like, that's exactly what I wanted to hear, because it means we're the first with boots on the ground. We've got our own little Gateway City event happening right here in Nevada. So what's basically going on here in the Absolute Universe on a broader scale? It's a race to hunt superheroes, those individuals that have powers. That's the bigger narrative and the bigger story that's being told. And all these organizations are trying to get their hands on these various levels of powers so they can use them for their own ends. The military is going after Absolute Wonder Woman. Lazarus is going after Absolute Superman. Absolute Joker is going after Absolute Batman. The Flash is being hunted down, and now it's the Green Lantern. So it's a phenomenal narrative. Can't wait until the first big event happens. But with that being said, guys, we're going to bring this...
That's another W video from them. Holy. That was crazy, chat. That was actually fucking crazy. That was insane. Damn. I honestly have no words. That was a W video, not gonna lie. W video for Comics Explained. For real, for real.